Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the follow-up of the F18 from SkyMaster. If you guys saw the Maiden video, that's what this is all about. I told you guys that I would do a follow-up video and that's what we're doing today. If you haven't seen the Maiden video, link down below in the description. Let's roll that intro and we will go over all the changes we made after the Maiden flight. Alright guys, so one of the takeaways from the Maiden flight was the takeoff was really touchy. So our runway at that field was, or is about 700-ish feet long, I think. Okay, so one thing on the Maiden was, you can tell from the video, but I wasn't the pilot, so thanks guys for all the encouraging words. I was there just for the support. I was not the pilot, so I was there to make sure that all the mechanics of the plane worked, and it did. So a couple of the issues that we had, or the primary issue, was the elevators, or the horizontal stabs of the plane. So the manual, if you're building one of these planes, I've put it out there in a few different spots, the manual is absolutely not correct. So do not follow the SkyMaster manual. Now I'll show you guys where it was, and where we've adjusted it to. So the manual, I believe just from memory, shows the 0 point on the elevator being at the top of the square. And that actually talks about the fuselage joint, or the outline. So basically it's saying that your 0 should have been there, which is what we set it to. That's the new 0 for us. So, you know, it's about, I don't know what we call that, about 3/8 of an inch, maybe half an inch down of back elevator. So what was happening was, on takeoff, because we were trimmed here, we were at full elevator and we weren't getting this much travel. We were only maybe getting something like that, right? So that was ultimately the problem with the elevator on the Maiden video, was the amount of travel that we had. So after that Maiden, everything's been redone. It should take off like this plane should take off. So talking a little bit more about the programming before we move on to some other things, was the way this was programmed before is the elevators were working just as the elevators, the ailerons were working just as the ailerons, and we had a mix going from the ailerons into the elevators to also add aileron support, because this plane doesn't fly, or you shouldn't fly it with just the ailerons working as ailerons. You need extra support back here. So one of the changes we made is we actually revamped the entire plane. These are acting as elevons, which are ailerons and elevators together. So if I'm doing just back elevator, we have our elevator control. Aileron control is just aileron control, but all that's mixed together in the radio. And then what we have is, we've got these are just generic channels, and we've got these paired to our aileron support, or aileron control. So now the plane should be a little bit more solid as far as mixing goes and control goes. One of the things that it did do is it did simplify the radio as well. So we had, I think, 8 or 10 mixes previously in the radio to make this all work, and now we've got 2. So way more simple, and it makes the entire plane more simple to deal with. All right, there's lots of comments on the Maiden video. Should have done this, should have done this, should have done this. It's easy to say that when you're on the other side of the video screen, but when you're there, when you're doing the Maiden of the plane, ultimately the goal is to get the thing up, get the thing down successfully as possible without any damage, trim it out if you can, and if you run into issues like we did on this plane, you just do the best job you can, which the pilot did. So we didn't land it with flaps. The reason we didn't land it with flaps is we had flight mode set up where, when we have flaps on, the trim on the elevator and aileron is separate on each flight condition. So the reason for that is we had to add 90 clicks or 90 points of elevator adjustment to make the plane fly flat and level. We didn't want to go through that whole process again of putting mid flaps on, trimming it out, full flaps on, trimming it out. We probably could have, but ultimately it's the pilot's decision. He didn't want to do that. So that's why we landed it so quickly. The gear on this plane is amazing. It had no problem dealing with the grass runway and the landing speed, which was pretty fast, but it worked. Some people were commenting on this plane running it off of a grass airstrip. Again, the landing gear on this plane is amazing. Where we're at today, we've got 3,000 feet of runway, about 1,500 of it is cut, and zero problems with this big F18 working on a grass strip. So what happened on the takeoff is we actually had two things. We've already talked about the elevator. The last thing that I'll mention is the spool up of the engines. So if you watch the Maiden video again, you'll see that the first third of the runway, the plane is moving very, very slowly. And afterwards, when we played around with the two King Tech engines, one of them was set a little bit different and it was spooling up slower than the other one. So we didn't have full power for basically a third of the runway until that engine finally kicked in and we actually had some get up and go. And then the last thing I'll bring up, guys, is at that particular runway, aborting that takeoff wasn't an option when we got to the end of the runway where we were. You know, after that section in the runway, basically we've got this, right? And it would have absolutely destroyed this plane. It would have tore the gear out of the plane and it would have been an absolute disaster. So, you know, in that situation, I agree with what the pilot decided to do. Full elevator control and just hold it on there as long as possible and hope it comes off. I think if the engines would have spooled up, we would have had a bit more success with that. We did obviously have the elevator issues as well, but boarding that takeoff was not an option. So that's the follow-up on the SkyMaster F18, guys. Absolutely beautiful jet. I know a bunch of you guys are building one of these planes because of the build thread I did or the build video I did. More power to you. Just obviously look at those questions and look at the manual and question all those items. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Emails down below, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. I check all my emails and everything. You can also comment down below too. I do look at all the comments in the video. So thanks guys for watching, and we will see you in the next video.